On the way to deliver food, I received a call from my drunken girlfriend. So I put down the overdue order and rushed to find her. But when I arrived with a sprained leg, she cheered for winning the bet. Later, she came to my door in a drunken state, but I refused to let her in, because that very night, she had already gambled me away. Ding! Story Shots reminds you to click the subscribe button at the bottom right corner to read the full novel. At 2 in the morning, there weren't many delivery riders still taking orders. I had gathered orders from 3 neighborhoods and was speeding along. Just then, my girlfriend Jessica called. As soon as I picked up, there was a deafening noise from the disco in the background. "Hank, I'm drunk." The order was just 50 meters away, and I wanted to tell her to wait quietly. But then I heard a man's teasing voice in the background. "Miss, you're so drunk. Let me take you home." Before he finished speaking, the call was disconnected. I immediately turned the bike around. In my haste, I collided head-on with an oncoming vehicle. My leg instantly burned, bleeding profusely. But when I hobbled to the bar entrance, I saw Jessica laughing brightly. She almost fell into a man's arms. "Hank, I'm here." Seeing me, Jessica waved excitedly and ran over. I hurriedly patted the dust off my clothes, opening my arms to welcome her. But she ran straight past me, heading toward my delivery bike. "What are we betting on this time?" I turned my head. Only then did I notice her friends crowding around. "Let's bet on how many orders were spilled." Jessica clapped her hands excitedly. "That's a good one. I guess 5 orders. I guess 3. Then I'll say 1. Her friends all started placing their bets. No one noticed the growing darkness on my face. When the delivery box was opened, it was already a mess inside. "Ah, I won again." Jessica jumped up excitedly, as if she had won the most glorious prize in the world. She immediately opened a bottle of champagne to celebrate. "I can't help it. My Hank loves me so much." Hearing that I might be picked up by a nasty man, of course, he rushed over. She hummed a little tune happily, collecting money from everyone. In no time, a stack of $5,000 bills was stuffed into my hand. "Baby, take this. You deserve it." This wasn't the first time. Whether it was that bottle of champagne or this stack of red bills, it was more than I could earn in a month of hard work. I silently calculated the late penalties, not knowing what expression to make. The spilled champagne stung my bruised leg, making me sober. I stuffed the money back into her hand. "Since you're okay, I'm leaving." Jessica's smile froze instantly. "Are you mad?" She leaned in gently. "Don't be angry. I just want you to keep me company." I put down her hand as she pouted. "Stop it. I have to go back." I pushed my broken bike, trying to leave as if nothing had happened. But the broken chain shattered my last bit of dignity. Once, twice, no matter how hard I tried, the wheels wouldn't move. Jessica clicked her tongue. Her tone was full of disappointment. "Everyone's having fun. Why do you have to be the clown?" The crowd fell silent. All eyes were on me. She kicked the dilapidated electric bike, and it crashed to the ground. "Say something. Why are you ignoring me? Is this broken bike more important than me?" Pedal was kicked off, lying lonely on the ground. When I borrowed the bike from my roommate, I had vowed to take good care of it. But now, no matter how much I tried to fix it, it would never be the same. I dug my nails into my flesh, swallowing this humiliating disgrace, and carried the bike away. For the first time, Jessica was left behind, completely furious. "If you leave now, don't ever come back." I paused, but I didn't turn back. When did I start living so miserably? Probably that Christmas in my junior year, when Jessica said she wanted to go to Iceland. She said, "Hank, next Christmas, let's go to Iceland to see the Northern Lights. They say lovers who make a wish under the Northern Lights will be together forever." At that moment, I looked at her hopeful profile. I thought maybe it's time to get a ring. But when I found out that a ticket to Iceland cost $30,000, I hesitated. That was far more than my annual living expenses. I couldn't help but wonder if I could really give her the life she wanted. After half a month of gloom, I mustered the courage to tell her the truth. Jessica, I can't go to Iceland, but I hope we can go to Tibet together after graduation. That was a reachable dream for me. She was momentarily stunned, then kindly agreed. I had calculated carefully. Weekend tutoring plus delivering food at night. In half a year, I could save enough for the trip to Tibet, and the remaining half year would be enough to save for a decent diamond ring. I wanted to give her the best I could. Since then, almost all my free time went to working, until I didn't notice when Jessica started drifting further away from me. The ringtone brought me back from my memories. It's Glynis Yeager, Jessica's roommate. Hank, Jessica didn't come back to the dorm last night, and I can't reach her. Remind her to attend the opening report meeting this afternoon. When Jessica Wilson first enrolled, her family bought her a 3-bedroom apartment off campus. She almost never stayed in the dorm, so Glynis's calls were usually just a gesture of goodwill. In the past, whenever we had a spat, I was always the first to make up with her. Otherwise, she would conspire with her roommate to force me to give in. I went back to the station to deal with some tickets. The station chief scolded me harshly. I probably won't be able to do this job for a while. By the time everything was handled, it was already lunchtime. I bought some groceries on the way and hurried to Jessica's place. All the way there, I couldn't help but think about the terrifying scene from last night. Maybe she loves me, and that's why she resents me. Once she sobers up, she'll naturally come to me and apologize. I convinced myself of this as I stood at the door. I planned to make her a meal with 3 dishes and a soup. But when the door opened, everything was completely different from what I had imagined. Jessica Wilson frantically pushed away the man. Their clothes were intact, but they were so intimately close. Hank, let me explain. The man stumbled off the sofa, unable to stand straight. I recognized him. It was Cardew Cheney, Jessica Wilson's childhood friend. Since he returned from abroad last year, he's been sticking to Jessica like a fly, impossible to get rid of. Cardew kindly brought me back yesterday. We were both drunk and just passed out. We were both fully clothed. Nothing happened. Nothing happened. The more she explained, the more powerless it felt. I struggled to control my breathing, trying not to let the tears fall. All the blood in my body rushed to my head in anger, making me lose my sanity completely. I swung a punch. Blood oozed from the corner of Cardew Cheney's mouth instantly. But the next second, Jessica Wilson threw herself in front of him, covering his face in distress. Hank Lloyd, are you crazy? I said nothing happened. What more do you want? You ask me what I want? I looked at her in disbelief, not knowing when she had become so unfamiliar. Tears finally fell. Last year's Halloween in Las Vegas, New Year's in Vancouver, even this year's Lantern Festival in Japan. Can you dare tell me he wasn't with you? Every time Jessica Wilson went on a trip, she would generously post group photos. But she always cropped out a certain someone's figure. Of course, she wouldn't admit it. In all the places I missed, it was Cardew Cheney who filled in. Slap. A stinging slap landed on my face. It hurt to the core. Jessica Wilson roared. If you hadn't been absent all the time, would I need to find someone else to accompany me? Hank Lloyd, you only care about your fragile pride. Have you ever thought about me? Why do I always have to accommodate you? But I just wanted to work hard for our future. Was that wrong? Cardew Cheney disdainfully patted my shoulder. The future she wants? Can you provide it? I wasn't around before, but now that I'm back, it's not your turn anymore. His contempt felt like a hammer, heavily landing on my heart, making it hard for me to breathe. I clenched my fist and aimed at Cardew Cheney's temple. This time, Jessica Wilson tightly shielded him. She raised her head, closed her eyes, ready to sacrifice everything. But I couldn't help but think, when did she stop caring for me? Forget it. None of this matters anymore. I lowered my fist, walking weakly into the room. I took out the ring that had been hidden for a long time from the TV cabinet. Under the direct light, the diamond shone brilliantly, magnifying the shock and embarrassment to the extreme. In front of Jessica Wilson, I threw it into the trash can. Calmly, I said, "Let's break up." Her expression gradually stiffened. She slowly raised her eyes, her lips trembling. No, it's not supposed to be like this. We shouldn't be like this. She lunged at me, helplessly grabbing my hand. Hank, listen to me. It's my fault. I'm sorry. Can you forgive me? I truly love you. I really can't live without you. Jessica Wilson cupped my face, trying to give me a cheap kiss. But I was exhausted, using all my strength to push her away and walk out. She collapsed on the ground. Hank Lloyd, you can't leave. I won't let you leave me. How can you do this? Her hysterical screams echoed behind me, then turned into roars, wails, and finally sobs. I had imagined countless times how she would cry tears of joy, shy and happy, saying yes when the surprise proposal was revealed. But now there was only shock, no joy. Back at the dorm, my roommates were heading out for their afternoon classes. I grabbed Louis, asking him to help me take leave. Why do you look so terrible? He stopped, insisting on taking me to the hospital. But what could I tell the doctor? That I felt nauseous? That no matter how much I vomited, I couldn't get clean? I'm fine, just need to sleep. You don't look fine at all. What's really going on? Louis insisted, picking me up easily. I told you I'm fine. Can you just leave me alone? With an inadvertent push, Louis fell to the ground. He stared at me for a long time. Finally, he left with a "get some rest." The dorm was empty except for me. Finally, I could cry in disgrace. I cried until there were no more tears left. Then I fell into a hazy sleep. I had a long dream returning to the past. I saw Jessica Wilson downstairs, shouting my name, unabashedly declaring her love for me. Freshman year was my hardest year. I failed my college entrance exam and barely made it into a safety school. Then my father had an accident at the construction site, almost becoming paraplegic. In those dark days, I frequently walked to the riverbank. Just when I was about to give up, it was Jessica Wilson who grabbed my sleeve. She smiled and said, "How hard can it be to die? Such a good-looking face, what a waste. If you can't go on, I'll give you a goal. Come love me. Let's see how long we can last." She was like the sun, bright and unyielding, illuminating my entire being. That love lasted 3 years. Thinking back now, even when I was like that, she was willing to come down and embrace me. Now, 3 years later, how did things change? She loved my looks, drawn by my appearance. But when I fell, she couldn't accept my downfall. "Hank, are you feeling better?" I groggily opened my eyes, glimpsing the darkened sky outside the window. Louis and the others had returned from class. "Jessica Wilson is looking for you. She's been waiting downstairs for a while." I glanced out the window but didn't respond. The youngest, who was playing a game, put down his headphones and complained helplessly, "Lloyd, I'm begging you. I'll call you Dad. Okay? Just go down already. Jessica Wilson is about to blow up our phones." I felt a pang of guilt for all the interruptions over the years. I hurried downstairs. Jessica Wilson's eyes were still red and swollen. Her cheeks were flushed, like a dewy flower petal. Suddenly, I remembered her saying coyly to me. She called it tear makeup, a trick to look pitiful, irresistible to anyone. She stepped forward to grab my hand, whispering softly, "Hank, are you still mad at me?" I slightly turned to avoid her without making it obvious. "We've already broken up." She hesitated for a moment, then lowered her hand. She handed me a large bag. "Aren't you busy looking for a job lately? How can you do it without these? You never wore the suit I got you. And this tie, I had it custom made for you." Over the years, Jessica Wilson was always keen on dressing me up like a doll. I once thought it was uncontrollable love, until she repeatedly threw away my so-called commoner clothes, unabashedly sharing them with her friends as a joke. That's when I understood I was just her toy to pass the time. Thinking of this, I couldn't help but chuckle lightly. "I'm not worthy. The trash can suits me better." Her face subtly stiffened. She probably thought I would never know how she mocked me behind my back. "Hank, I just want to be with you now. Didn't you want to get married?" "I agree, we can register tomorrow." How laughable. It seemed like I was the only one who wanted to get married. Ignoring my retreat, she insisted on grabbing my hand. Her perfectly timed tears just smeared her carefully prepared makeup. Hank, I've given up everything to win you back. There are so many people here. Do you really want to make me sad? A crowd gradually gathered around us. Just like when she confessed to me back then. I thought she loved passionately. She knew I couldn't refuse. But now things have changed. Jessica Wilson, for the last time, we are over. I hope you stop bothering the people around me. With that, I turned and walked back into the building. Hank Lloyd, if you take another step, we're really done. Ignoring her exasperation, her tantrums. This time I left resolutely. When I returned to the dorm, everyone pretended to be busy with their own things. Lewis glanced at me secretly, wanting to say something but stopping. In the end, I spoke first. Lewis, about your electric scooter. I can't pay you back. When I planned to propose, only Lewis supported me. He even lent me his scooter. Now, saving money had lost its meaning. I withdrew some money and transferred it to Lewis. I'll reimburse you at the original price. At this point, brothers understood everything. Lewis heavily put his arm around my shoulder. We haven't had a game night in a while. Tonight, we drink till we drop. That night, we brought back 3 cases of beer. And in my dream, for the first time, I wasn't worried about money. With no more part-time job plans, I had a lot more free time. I spent my days in the library, preparing for the civil service exam day and night. Occasionally, when my eyes hurt from studying, I'd look up to see couples flirting. It was like a shadow from the past. In a daze, a cup of latte was placed on my desk. The lid had a familiar cat face drawn on it. Your favorite? Iced? Extra milk? Less sugar? Jessica Wilson pulled out the chair next to me and sat down. Naturally, like an old friend. You still like to sit by the window just like before. Hank, do you still have feelings for me? After a month apart, Jessica Wilson had lost quite a bit of weight. Dark circles under her eyes were clearly visible. I pushed the cup of latte back to her. I actually can't drink coffee at all. It gives me stomach aches. She used to always insist on having 2 different flavors. I would indulge her and join her. As for the seat, I just sit wherever there's a spot. You probably don't know how scarce seats are in the library during finals. Do you? Jessica was momentarily stunned. Her eyes filled with undisguised sadness. She sniffled, looking utterly pitiful. The research proposal is due tomorrow, but since we broke up, I haven't been able to sleep well. Hank, can you help me? Please? I knew Jessica loved to have fun. This past month, she hadn't stopped posting about her all-nighters. In the past, I was like an old father, chasing after her, bit by bit, pushing her to study. But I never imagined that after we broke up, she would let herself go to this extent. I said flatly, I'm very busy. Handle it yourself. I didn't realize before how considerate you were in helping me analyze my ideas. Only after losing you did I realize how precious it was. I was unmoved and continued to focus on my work. Can you let me take a look at your proposal? I'll give you anything you want. She leaned closer to me, her words suddenly becoming suggestive. A wave of nausea hit me unexpectedly. So in her eyes, I was just a convenient transaction. An inexplicable anger flared up inside me. What makes you think that just by beckoning, I would foolishly clean up your mess? Do you think you're worth it? My sudden outburst turned Jessica's face pale with fright. The surrounding eyes all focused on us, silently condemning. At that moment, Cardew Cheney appeared just in time. He had probably been waiting for this moment for a long time. He put his arm around Jessica's shoulder and sneered, I told you not to look for him. What can a bookworm who spends all his time in the library do? As long as you have the money, you can buy papers from anywhere. Pretending to be impressive in the library, he really picked the wrong place. Cardew's sudden indiscriminate attack made him the target of everyone's anger. The students around us stood behind me, forming a circle of support. I said, even if you buy them all, it won't help. Some people can't understand a single paper. Cardew grabbed my collar. You! But this time, Jessica stood in front of me. A sudden slap echoed loudly in the library. Overdue. Have you gone mad? Our matters are none of your business. If you dare to bother Hank again, we're finished. Under the collective rebuke, Overdue slunk away in disgrace. Before leaving, Jessica tugged at my sleeve, looking down. Hank, I'm sorry. I didn't mean it like that just now. Please don't look at me like that. I just love you so much. But it's really strange. I used to long for her to bow her head to me. Now I felt no emotion at all. It seemed I no longer loved her. So I wouldn't hate her either. After the interview, I went to Tibet alone, to fulfill my unfinished dreams. In front of the snow-white Padala Palace, countless devout followers walked step by step towards their faith. But I couldn't help but think of the night I walked hand in hand with Jessica towards the temple. At that time, my father was in the ICU, critically ill. I stayed outside the ward, unable to eat for days. I was a wreck. Finally, one day, Jessica couldn't stand it anymore. She put me on her motorcycle. The wind roared past my ears, seemingly taking away all my troubles. We rode all the way, finally stopping at the foot of Danzi Mountain in the west of the city. She said, "Let's go. If you don't want to live, we'll ask Guanyin to trade one life for another." So we really knelt every 5 steps and bowed every 3 steps. From the foot of the mountain to the top, the sky gradually brightened. Miraculously, after that day, my father was out of danger. Everything gradually got better. Hank! I snapped out of my reverie. Turning around, I saw Jessica standing behind me. You really came to Tibet after all. I was momentarily puzzled. But in a split second, I understood. Ms. Wilson never failed to get what she wanted, especially something as trivial as a travel itinerary. Hank, can we start over? I once swore to Buddha that we would be together forever. But now, why doesn't it count anymore? I almost believed her, if I hadn't accidentally overheard her phone call. She said, "How romantic. Even I might fall in love with myself. This time, Hank Lloyd will definitely be mine." She only ever loved herself. Yet she used the guise of loving me to deceive both of us for so many years. Until the end. Even she believed it. With my last bit of patience, I said to her, "Please, let the memories remain pure. Don't make me regret loving you." This wasn't the ending she had imagined. Jessica Wilson asked blankly, "We can't go back, can we?" The silence said it all. But she still held on to hope for an answer until she finally squatted down, hugging her head and crying bitterly. "Hank Lloyd, I'm sorry. I loved you so much. How could I lose you?" But it's really funny. Her utter shame was real. Her regret was real too. But the love she professed for me was so insincere. A week after returning from Tibet, Jessica Wilson and Overdue Cheney announced their relationship. In the photo, the diamond ring was prominently displayed. But at that time, I was busy with my physical examination and political review. I only found out when Lewis mentioned it. That night, Jessica Wilson sent me a message. "I'm sorry. Now, I'm steadily walking my own path, everything going smoothly." But I never managed to say, "It's okay. That was 3 years of my youth wasted." No one deserves to be forgiven with a smile. I saw Jessica Wilson again over a month later at the thesis defense. She seemed to have gained some weight. Her thesis was quite good, definitely high quality. But unfortunately, it was hastily put together. And with insufficient preparation. She couldn't answer any of the committee's questions. Naturally, she failed. Strangely, the normally prideful Jessica Wilson didn't struggle this time. The next day, I received an invitation from Jessica Wilson's father. After repeatedly refusing, he simply drove to the dormitory entrance, clearly determined not to give up. The Wilson family villa was on an island in the city center. Most residents there were wealthy and influential. I remember the first time I came, trying to save on cab fare. I got lost in the neighborhood. Now looking back, it felt much more desolate. "Hank, I heard you performed outstandingly at the defense, earning the title of excellent graduate, truly promising. Unlike old me, I just hope my foolish daughter can have a good future." Mr. Wilson started with polite words, seemingly flattering, yet with a hidden agenda. Just say what you need to. His heavy hand covered mine. Would you be willing to go abroad with Jessica? If you agree, I guarantee you'll both never have to worry about anything for the rest of your lives. To be honest, I was a bit surprised. Was Jessica Wilson's previous announcement just a joke? Mr. Wilson glanced upwards unintentionally. I then noticed Jessica Wilson hiding in the corner. Despite her efforts to conceal it, I could see her slightly protruding belly. So, my earlier impression of her gaining weight wasn't wrong. I finally understood the purpose of this feast. Sir, I respect you as an elder, but you can't expect me to be a fool, can you? Rubbish. Exposed, Mr. Wilson's face turned red with anger. He smashed the teacup to pieces. Just like before, that mid-autumn festival, Jessica Wilson whimsically brought me home for dinner. I carefully selected red wine as a gift, but Mr. Wilson accidentally dropped it while accepting it. He said, "Sorry," slipped my hand, "but this wine, spilled is spilled. It's just a pity for my tens of thousands worth Turkish carpet." I stood there, flustered, my ears burning hot. Jessica Wilson immediately took me away from home. I thought she felt sorry for me, but once outside, she laughed heartily. "Did you see how mad Dad was? I should have brought you home sooner." Seeing my expression, she hastily apologized. "I was just joking. See, our positions were worlds apart. How could there be love?" I tested. Clearly, the Wilson-Cheney marriage alliance benefited both families. Now that the marriage is off, I wonder who's the carpet and who's the wine. Mr. Wilson's face instantly turned as black as charcoal. It seemed the rumors were true. The Wilson Group's financial chain indeed had issues. He angrily threatened, "Don't be ungrateful. Even if the Wilson Group collapses, I, Forrest Wilson, can still ruin your future with a single word." "Really?" I smiled faintly. "Then I'd like to see if you can extend your reach into the Economic Investigation Division." By then, the public notice period had passed, and the contract had been signed. I had become a proud public servant. Watching Mr. Wilson's pupils tremble. From shock to despair, Jessica Wilson stumbled out, her hand carefully covering her belly. "Hank, if I said the marriage was forced, would you believe me? You said you'd love me forever. Was that all a lie?" I paused. A deep sadness welled up in me. The once bright and flamboyant sun had finally fallen into the mud. I turned my back, bidding a final farewell to those 3 years of youth. Wish us good health, never to meet again. The Wilson Group's problems had long been making news. If we meet again, it might be in court. I didn't expect the reunion to come so soon. On the day I reported for my internship, Mr. Wilson was formally summoned for investigation. By the time Jessica Wilson hurried over, it was too late to see her father. Seeing me, she seemed to grasp at her last straw. "Hank, will I never see my father again? Can you help me? I just want to see him one more time." In a daze, I seemed to see myself struggling many years ago. But black and white are distinct, clear-cut. No matter how moved I was, I couldn't cross the line. "Go back first. There's always a way." But she stubbornly struggled at the door, until she cried and fainted. Suddenly, there was an exclamation from the crowd. Only then did I notice the glaring blood, flowing down her calf, winding down. That was the first time I felt it. A vibrant life departing, in just a brief moment. All joys and sorrows, grudges and enmities, became insignificant. I frantically dialed the emergency number, trying to grasp the last breath of life for Jessica Wilson at the gates of death. Fortunately, everything was still in time. When Jessica Wilson woke up, it was already the latter half of the next night. "Are Jessica Wilson's family members here?" A nurse anxiously called out in the hallway. I got up and stepped into the room. Under Jessica Wilson's expectant gaze, I ultimately did not respond to that call for family. She murmured, "Hank, I have nothing left. I only have you, but I no longer belong to her, just like she never belonged to me." I gently lowered her hand that she had raised. Jessica, you saved my life back then. Now I've repaid you. We owe each other nothing. Jessica Wilson looked at me in disbelief, silently stunned for a long time. Finally, she smiled in relief. In the end, she chose to let go. 3 years ago, Hank Lloyd was young and ignorant. He didn't understand that love can take many forms, but it cannot be pity and debt. Yet 3 years later, Jessica Wilson, through tears and sorrow, comprehended this cruel truth. After that day, I consciously applied to transfer out of the Wilson Group's investigation team. I had also seen Jessica Wilson a few times at the office. Each time was hurried. She seemed to have matured a lot overnight, became strong and forbearing. She worked hard, running around for her father. Occasionally, our eyes would meet. We would just nod slightly and quickly part ways. Everything was as I wished. We completely became the most familiar strangers. July. The graduation ceremony arrived as scheduled. The vast campus became lively again. Everyone blessed each other and took photos to remember the moment. Only around Jessica Wilson, there was no one. After the thesis incident, Jessica Wilson had to apply for an extension. Plus, the impact of the Wilson family's troubles. In such an occasion, I thought she wouldn't show up. But at the evening ball, the people who were still pretending during the day completely tore off their masks. Under the guise of celebration, they poured glass after glass of red wine over Jessica Wilson's head, like a devil's carnival. But Jessica Wilson is such a proud person. She angrily stood up, raised her hand to return all the humiliation. With a slap, a bright red handprint landed on Jessica Wilson's face. The instigator was Cardew Cheney. "Oh, isn't this my beloved Jessica? Why is your temper still so big? Isn't this slap what you used to love?" Just as another slap was about to fall, I couldn't help but step forward, gripping his wrist. "Who do you think you are?" Cardew Cheney's frustration turned into frenzy. He immediately swung his left hand, trying to punch me, the uninvited guest. "Mr. Cheney, if I remember correctly, your Cheney family is still under investigation, right? A punch here would be assaulting a public official." Cardew Cheney's eyes almost sparked with fire, but he was helpless. His punch landed on a nearby decorative column. "Hank Lloyd, we have a long future ahead, but what can be done? He no longer has a future." After all, I couldn't tell him. His paper-selling business chain had long been uncovered. It had officially been filed for investigation. Perhaps for the Cheney family's power, this wasn't a big deal. But knowing his actions, Mr. Cheney allowed him to develop. Thus, it became an important part of the Cheney family's money laundering. The story had already headed towards an uncontrollable end. While we were confronting each other, Jessica Wilson had already escaped the scene without anyone noticing. I followed her out of the venue. She was hiding in a corner, lost in thought. No matter how she wiped, the red wine on her white dress remained that bright red. I handed her a handkerchief. "Clean your face first. You used to be so flamboyant. Don't clash head-on in the future." Jessica Wilson took the handkerchief in a daze. Her eyes reddened imperceptibly. She suddenly stood on tiptoe, leaning towards me. I turned my head away instantly. If there's a towel on the ground blocking your way, you'd pick it up and throw it away, but you'd never use it to wipe your mouth. Do you understand what I mean? Jessica Wilson's outstretched hand froze in midair. That was the first time I saw the word embarrassed on her face. "Sorry, I was being presumptuous." She lowered her head, not daring to meet my eyes again. She fled hastily. Long after, every time I recalled that sentence, I regretted not speaking properly, not saying a dignified goodbye. Who would have thought? Our youth, accompanied by sighs, ended abruptly in that summer. The last time I saw Jessica Wilson was 2 years after graduation. The rain that day was heavy. My wife had a craving, demanding crayfish delivery in the middle of the night. But after waiting for a long time, the order was already far overdue. Finally, when the bell rang, I heard a familiar voice. "Really sorry. The rain was too heavy, and I accidentally flipped over." So, following the voice, it was Jessica Wilson. The oversized delivery uniform looked particularly small on her. Her raincoat, which did not cover her well, was full of mud from her fall. She was holding a box of crayfish, all of which had turned over. Oil was dripping down in a trickle. The moment she saw me, Jessica Wilson lowered her head in panic. "I'll compensate you for this order, but please don't give me a bad review." My wife compassionately took her hand and said, "Don't worry about the crayfish. Oh my, you've even scraped your skin." Saying this, she pulled her inside. Jessica Wilson, like a startled rabbit, nervously retreated towards the door. "No need. My shoes are dirty. They'll mess up your house." But knowing my wife's warm personality, she wouldn't let her leave like that. Ignoring her protests, she pulled her inside. Then she went back to the room to get some medicine. Only Jessica and I were left in the hallway, and the atmosphere suddenly became awkward. "You actually bought a house here." Looking up, I noticed Jessica Wilson peeking around, secretly observing my house. What a coincidence. This house was in the same neighborhood as the one Jessica Wilson's family bought for her back then. Even the layout of the apartment was exactly the same. I suddenly understood that she might have misunderstood something. Quickly, I laughed it off and said, "I don't have that kind of ability. I just happened to get a welfare house from my work unit. I was just lucky." Jessica Wilson's eyes visibly dimmed. My wife finally came back with bandages. She carefully unwrapped them and started cleaning and applying medicine to Jessica Wilson's wounds. She couldn't help but nag. "It's not easy for a girl to do this kind of work. You must be careful at night." Speaking of which, my husband used to deliver food too. I heard he even hurt his leg for his ex-girlfriend back then. My wife joked playfully, but she didn't notice that Jessica Wilson's eyes were already quietly turning red. Tears, as big as beans, fell uncontrollably. My wife panicked. "Hey, why are you crying?" "I'm sorry. Did I talk too much?" Jessica Wilson hurriedly wiped away her tears. She tried hard to suppress her sobs. "I'm fine. It's just that it's been a long time since someone cared about me like this. Thank you." After saying that, she hurriedly ran away, leaving behind a thin figure in the night. Everything happened too quickly. My wife hadn't recovered yet and leaned into my arms, feeling wronged. "Honey, did I mess things up again with good intentions?" I lovingly patted her head to comfort her. "Of course not. Maybe because of your kindness, she can get through the tough winter." Later, at a class reunion, I accidentally heard that Cardew Cheney had been released from prison. Back then, when the scandal broke out, Cardew Cheney became the scapegoat of the Cheney family, taking all the blame. Due to academic fraud and his long-term imprisonment, he never obtained his degree. After being released, he hit a wall everywhere with no way out. In the end, he had to flee abroad in haste, completely disappearing from everyone's sight. And Jessica Wilson also completely vanished from people's view. As time passed, those people and things from our youth eventually blurred. But I never forgot that summer by the river, the dazzling girl who, on a whim, saved me.